Hey guys, it is a double podcast day. How fun is that? I have Terry C Jennings on this episode of the podcast with me. She is the author of Night of the Cape and tells me all about her journey to being published, who her favorite authors are, and what genre she would try if she had to do some genre hopping. I think you guys are going to really enjoy this interview with Terry. She's so lovely. I really had such a blast talking to her. And let's start off by having you tell me about your novel, Night of the Cape, and Captain Dom's Treasure, because they both come out the same day, right?
They do. They do. So absolutely. Well, Dominguita Melendez is a Cuban-American third grader who loves to read. She also loves her abuela, her grandmother, and abuela reads to her every night. And she reads the classics, books that she brought from Cuba, like Don Quixote and Treasure Island and The Three Musketeers. But Abuela's getting forgetful, and Dom's parents think that Abuela isn't safe living with them anymore. And Abuela goes to live in Florida with her sister, and now Dominguita is very lonely for her. So for recess, Dominguita decides to read Don Quixote so she can feel close to Abuela. So in the Night of the Cape, we find Dominguita reading at recess, and that's normal for her because she reads all the time anyway. But this time she gets caught by the class bully who says that the reason that Dominguita reads is because she doesn't have any friends, which is true. But not so, she says. She's studying to be a knight. But now everyone knows, according to the bully, that girls can't be knights. So the rest of the Night of the Cape is Dominguita's I'll show you. She tries to do things that help her be a worthy knight, even down to fighting a giant or tilting with windmills, whichever one you want. Now, in Captain Dom's Treasure, Dominguita and her newfound friends find a treasure map inside an old copy of Treasure Island. They were about to become pirates. They were about to start pretending to be pirates, and they were going to have Dominguita's brother make them a map. But instead, when she goes to pick up a book at the library, and it's an old book, it's in the stacks, and she finds this map. And now they have to find out, well, is this a true map? Is this a true treasure? And then if it is a true treasure, then they have to find the treasure. But just like in Treasure Island, Dominguita overhears that there's another group of people that want that treasure. So it's a race. It's a race for Dominguita and her friends to beat these other guys to find the treasure. And the treasure actually belongs to someone that they know. And so it's very important for them to find that treasure and return it to its rightful owner. So, so those are the two books, and I'm delighted that they're coming out together, and I can't wait for kids to read them and see what they think.
Oh, I feel like they'll love them. I love a good treasure hunt too. That's going to be, very fun. And I'm sure there's a lot of, good lessons to be learned in those stories. And, I'm sure you're so excited to have them come out together. Tell me a little bit about your journey to this point, to having these two books come out.
Okay, it's a really long journey. I always wanted to be a writer because stories are always rolling around in my head. But I didn't do anything about it until my kids were in high school. I was always volunteering, and until they went to high school, I didn't have a whole lot of time. But by then I started having time. And I joined a writers group, a children's writers group in my neighborhood. And the first thing that I took to them was an essay that I wrote about teaching my daughter to drive. And when she was 15, and one of the ladies in the writers group said, you need to submit this to the Washington Post. And I said, which is kind of like our local newspaper. We live outside the Washington area. And I said, oh, sure. So I did. And by golly, 3 weeks later, I called them back and I said, which is something you really shouldn't do, but I didn't know what I was doing. So I called them back and I said, so what did you think? And they said, oh yeah, we were about to send you a contract. So it was like, whoa, and I thought that I was going to be on the New York Times bestseller list just because of that. But that was 1999, and it didn't happen that way, right? I wrote since then. I've written many, many forgettable things, and folks tell you to build up your resume. So I did. I tried a lot of work for hire. I did a lot of work for hire, especially in science. I'm good enough in science to be able to write about it. So I did a lot of science stories for kids. I worked for the Smithsonian Science Education Center, writing science stories for them. I wrote a family humor column for my local newspaper, free for nothing. But all the time, that just wasn't, I was writing and it was great, but it wasn't enough. I wanted to be published. So published, I wanted to have a real book that you could open and read. So eventually I met a science publisher who needed a book about volcanoes. And actually she knew my work because she had already rejected me once before. But I said, hey, I think I can write that book about volcanoes for you. And she said, okay, sounds like a good idea. And 2 weeks later, I had a contract and I hadn't even written a word. But I think she was desperate at that point. So that book was Gopher to the Rescue, a volcano recovery story. And it was by Arbor-Dale Publishers. And that was great. I really, really had my first real book. I wrote 3 more books for them. I wrote a book about the women's liberation movement. That was nonfiction, but still, there was that little thing out in the distance that I wanted to be published in fiction. I wanted, you got to do, be really legit. So being Cuban, someone told me that I should write about Cuban kids. And honestly, I had never thought about that. Because when I first came to the United States, all I wanted to do was lose my accent and be like everybody else. I was 12 years old. I wanted to blend in. And I was in Richmond, Virginia, and I was the only Cuban kid kid from anywhere else in my middle school. Same thing in my high school, same thing in my college. So I always just wanted to blend in, and writing a book about Cuban kids just never came into my head. So, but I respected this person, and this was like 2008. This was even before I started. We Need Diverse Books started. But I started writing a book about what my family went through during the Cuban Revolution. Now, I wrote that book about 14 different times. Wow. And I'm not kidding you. And totally rewritten, totally different things. And I eventually started getting requests to send full manuscripts. And then I'd get a request from an agent saying, okay, if you do this, I'll take you on as a client. But then it was, maybe not. And then another one would say, if you do this, I'll take you on as a client. Oh, maybe not. But I think it was June of 2017, I met Natalie Lacasselle at the New Jersey SCBWI. And I had seen her bio, and I had submitted my work to her. And I thought, if anybody is a good match for me, Natalie is a good match. And I was delighted when we had the little 15-minute thing that she said, I love it. I want you to send me the full and let's talk. So we talked, and I sent her the full in August. I wasn't quite through with it. And she offered me representation in September. So that was my dream story. But guess what? That book hasn't gotten published yet. It went out on submission, and it didn't do well. So it's back. I have rewritten it again a couple times, and I'm ready to send it back to Natalie, but that one never did. However, she sold a picture book that I had written, and that is coming out in February 2022. And then around March of 2018, I started working on Dominguita. And the first thing that happened there was that some folks that I was talking to about this book with said, hey, really, this is not a good idea because kids don't like to pretend. So I thought, this is not something that I would have thought. But anyway, I asked Natalie, and she said, absolutely, kids do like to pretend. I like to pretend. So since both of us like to pretend, we went through. So I finally sent it to Natalie in November, along with a really good sketch of Captain Dom's treasure, and about 5 or 6 more little ideas that, if she wanted to send it as a series, that it could work. It went out on submission on March 6th of 2019, and on April 23rd, she got interest from a publisher that said they were sending it to acquisitions. And then she called all the rest of the people that she had sent Dominguita to, and by golly, Simon & Schuster had just decided to send, to make an offer. And so they made a preemptive offer. And there you go. Now I'm a legit author.
That's so wonderful. I think journeys to that point can definitely be long and roundabout, but, it does sound like you've always been, had a love of storytelling and a love of writing. So I'm glad that you persisted and that you're here where you are now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It takes perseverance, and it's hard, but you get such a high when it does happen. It's so amazing. So, golly, I've just loved every minute of it.
Well, good. That's so exciting. Well, tell me a little bit about how querying went for you, and then maybe like your top tips for writers who are in those lovely querying trenches right now.
Well, querying was, again, it was very, with the Cuban book, it just took, there was a lot of querying. It was years and years, because I thought that was my best book. And it was. Now the querying for the Dawn book, I think that was quick. Natalie sent it to about 8 people, and we had good success with that. And it may be because there's not a lot of Cuban American books for young kids. But it was very, both of them were very, very quick. The tips that I could say for other authors that are trying to query right now is, when you're trying to query an agent, do your homework and really figure out where your match is, somebody that is a match. I thought that Natalie was a really good match for me. I would have been really, really disappointed if she hadn't wanted a full manuscript. Of course, I would have kept going, but you really do your work and try to figure out. Natalie does a lot of genres. And I like a lot of genres, and she seems to be a very down-to-earth person, and I'm down-to-earth. I'm not flashy. So I think doing your homework is very important. And the other thing is to do your best work before you submit. Don't be impatient. Don't say, and gosh, it's so easy to be impatient because you work on it so long and you think it's so good, and then you let it rest and you go back to it and you go, oh my goodness, did I really write that? But if you're impatient, you may be wasting your shot. You really need to do your best work. Know that that you really can't do anything with it anymore. It's going to be changed. When your agent gets it, there's going to be changes. And then when your editor gets it, there are going to be changes. But do your very best. Don't go out on submission too early. And then once the submission, goes, I tried not to think about it. I just kept on writing because, if that doesn't work, then you got to have something else in the pipeline to make your dream come true. So that's the way that I handled it.
Well, I think that that's a really smart thing. Yeah, I think when you're querying to try and find an agent, when you're querying one project, work on a new project, or find a new hobby, do something that, occupies your time so you're not just staring at your computer and checking your email over and over.
Right, right.
Well, wonderful. Thank you for sharing those tips. My next question, I'd love to know something that you hope readers will take away from your story.
Thanks, Rose. Thanks so much for asking that question, because being Cuban, what I hope that readers will take, especially readers who are immigrants or children of immigrants, is that they will see themselves in those books.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want them to see themselves portrayed as spunky, funny, and exciting, just like everyone else.
I love it.
Yeah, I hope that those kids that are not close to being immigrants, because, all of us are immigrants somewhere, you know?
Definitely.
So, but those that are not so close to being immigrants, they see a family who's just like theirs at the core.
I think that, that's what, in whatever your idea is that you want your readers to take away from your book, it is like you want them to see themselves in your book. And for, people who are immigrants or minorities or whatever, I think that there's been this great movement and this great focus in publishing to just have there be so much more diversity in what we read, right? And I think that's so helpful so that everybody who picks up a book could find themselves in what they're reading.
Right. And, and they call it mirrors and windows. And I think that is absolutely what we need to be doing, because all forever and ever before that one lady told me that I should be writing about Cuban kids, I wrote I wrote characters that were blonde and blue-eyed.
Yeah.
Because that's what that's what I thought was the right thing to do. And really, you don't see yourself there. And I want everyone to know that we're all different, but we're also human. And everybody has the same hopes. And yeah, we eat different things and we may celebrate things differently. But that's, I want us to think that we're all the very same. And it's special to be able to do it to readers of that young age. I thought that was a terrific opportunity to do it at the chapter book level. That's wonderful. I'm delighted with that.
Oh, I love that. And I think, that is the younger we start having our children understand those things and realize that everybody, we might look different or sound different, have different struggles, but we're all human. We all, need to celebrate our differences too and be proud of them, but respect everybody else too. I think starting at the chapter book level with that is probably going to be really special for some kids who are used to reading about just blonde hair, blue-eyed people who are not blonde haired, blue-eyed, and they're gonna be like, oh, this is someone is like me, they look like me. That'll be super special.
Yeah.
Well, I love it.
Thank you.
Yes. Well, my next question, I'd love to know who some of your favorite authors are and why you love them.
I think my all-time favorite's Kate DiCamillo. She is so imaginative. I still think that even as old as it is, because of Winn-Dixie, is one of my very, very favorite things. Her stories just have a lot of heart, and her prose is beautiful, and she can get away with writing at a beautiful, beautiful level, and still the kids understand her. And she's just one, she's the person that I would love to emulate. I can't. I'm not that good. My prose is not that good. But I love the way she's able to do things. The Elephant's Apprentice. It's just beautiful. So I love Laurie Halse Anderson and Tiffany Jackson. They're so brave about what they write for older children. I love Jason Reynolds because he's Jason Reynolds. And, I wish I had come up with the idea for Elephant and Piggy. That's the one thing.
Oh,
holy cow.
Yes. My kids love those books so much.
Oh, my goodness. How old are they?
I have a almost a year old, a 6-year-old, and a 10-year-old. And the 10-year-old
Wow.
and the 6-year-old, they love those books so much.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's like, the message, and it's they're just perfect. They're absolutely perfect books. Um, so yeah, those are some of my heroes.
I love it. Well, thank you for sharing that. And it's always, I love asking like what your favorite book is, who your favorite authors are, just because I feel like we miss things as books come out, and even authors that have been around for a really long time. So it's always good to share and recommend things, right?
Yep, absolutely.
So I feel like you've already answered my next question a little bit, but what you said you started really writing after your kids were grown, but did you write before that, like when you were younger? And then, what advice would you give to other people who took up writing at a similar time as you?
Okay, I'm going to say something that I wasn't going to say.
Okay.
But I really did. I wanted to be a writer, and I signed up for a creative writing class my senior year in high school with a teacher named Mrs. Everett. And Mrs. Everett was also my junior year English teacher. And she said one day in front of God and everybody in my class that I had used a thesaurus because there was no way that I could have used a word in my writing. And she didn't want kids to use the thesaurus. Well, I mean, that's a good life lesson, but guess what? I read very much when I was a kid. The word was strident, and I read very much when I was a kid. And strident is a word that translates very well from English to Spanish. I mean, the Spanish to English. And so it was part of my vocabulary. And I was so ticked off at what she said that I got myself taken out of her creative writing class.
Ooh.
And I majored in math instead of majoring in, trying to do something with writing, which is probably what might have made me happier. But I just never looked back. And it was a shame that I didn't look back. So then you start writing, and even if Mrs. Everett hadn't said that, writing may not have been a career that an immigrant kid back then would have been able to pursue. Because, you can't have a career when you're an immigrant that's going to be fulfilling. You got to have a career that puts food on the table and that gets you off the parents' payroll.
Yeah.
So, math was something that I was also good at, or good enough at, that I could get a job. And that's what I ended up doing. But I didn't write a lot, but in my head, stories were always rolling around. Anything happened, I reported for the Washington Post in my head, and it was always there. And then one day I decided, hey, it's time. I can do this, and it's time. I'm going to try it out. So I was about 50 then, and the rest, the story.
I love it. Well, do you have any advice for maybe other, people out there who are at a similar stage as you were, like around 50, kids are grown, to taking up writing and pursuing this author dream?
I think you said it. You said it. Pursue the author dream. Yeah, because it is a dream. It's if you had any sense at all and you were 50 years old, you would not do it.
That's probably true. It's like such a strange and tough industry that it's like, I wonder why any of us do it, right?
Rose, you got it.
Yes.
That is absolutely true. Why put yourself through that kind of torture?
Yeah.
It's hard, but it is a dream. And stories are always rolling around in my head, and they're always wanting to come out. And I didn't do that for so long that now that I can, it's like this faucet open. It's like, whoosh, I need to do it. And I always think about it. Am I being selfish? that I'm doing this now, and I should be doing other things. I should be spending my time differently. I was a big volunteer, and there's a lot of my friends that are still volunteering. And really, if it was for the betterment of the world, I probably should be volunteering. But this is my dream, and I decided that I was going to do this, and I'm trying to make it come true. And so my advice to people my age is, if it's your dream, go for it and try it. And, just gird yourself that you're going to have some rocky times. But keep going, because in the end, that seeing that book in your hand is, when you get your first cover, gosh, you cry. I cry. And I guess Cubans cry at anything. But, it's just such an emotional thing when you do get it. When you get that phone call, and I have had a lot of wine when I get those phone calls that are not so great. So it's just, you have to keep going.
Yeah. And I think you can make an argument, that you're writing and these books that, children will see themselves in and maybe use to inspire themselves, or they'll escape, they'll see, themselves in a different light. That's for the betterment of the world too, right? So in a way you're volunteering. It's just like in a very strange way, different than what you would think.
Thank you. Thank you for making me feel better. That's wonderful. I love you. That's exactly what I needed.
Yes.
I'm going to remember that.
Yes, remember that. Well, my next question, Terry, is if you were able to genre hop, what other genre or type of book would you most like to try writing?
Well, I have been genre hopping. Not been, some of it has been successful, some of it not. So I've tried nonfiction and creative nonfiction, and I have a whole bunch. Holy cow, I have files and files of picture books. One is going to be, the four science picture books and many other science picture books that never made it. And then the one that will be coming out next year, and I hope you'll invite me for that.
Oh, yeah.
And, I am working on some middle grades that are not so young, but I'd like to go back. Some of these, what we just talked about is so important, to get children that are younger, to give them these mirrors and these windows. And so I'm going to take some of those books that had blonde and blue-eyed kids, and I'm going to rewrite them for younger audiences, and with changing, the names from Michael to Pedro,
I love it.
Because those books need to be out there. So I'm going to rewrite those. And then I am working on some upper middle grades. To be honest, I don't think that I have it in me to write a YA book. It's just not me. Maybe my English isn't good enough. But I just, my pop English, let's say, is not good enough. So it's just something that hasn't grabbed me yet.
Well, you've got lots of different irons in the fire. I'm excited to see all the different things that you come out with.
Yes. I'm very excited for them too.
Awesome. My next question, what is the worst writing or publishing advice besides what that teacher told you when you were in school? What's the worst writing or publishing advice that anyone has ever given you?
Oh, golly. I think, okay. One thing, that lady that told me that the kids don't pretend, that was not so good. But there's one thing, and I like to write choppy sentences in one respect, and I like to write not incomplete sentences, but sentences where the subject might be understood. And some folks have said, hey, that'll never work, and you shouldn't do that. But I keep thinking, gosh, that's me. And actually they have sold. So
there you go.
on the one hand, on the other hand, Natalie and I worked on one that was very choppy, but it was a nonfiction book, and it was very choppy. I can't say a whole lot more, but eventually it got reworked and reworked and reworked, so it's not so choppy anymore. And it did sell, but I can't say more about that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think the gist of it too is like you got to be true to yourself too, right? Like if someone's trying to tell you this is how it's done or this is the only way it'll work, it's probably not true, because you can, make it work if that's your style and your voice, that's what you got to be true to.
Yeah. And you know what? I think that works with chapter books. My style works with chapter books. The short sentences, short paragraphs, run. I think it works. So maybe that's why this series got off to such a good start.
Well, there you go. It worked in your favor.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, if you could, for my next question, I'd love for you to tell me something you like to do when you're not writing.
Okay, now you mean other than reading, right?
Yes, other than reading, because we all love to read, right?
Okay, absolutely, because all that, unfortunately, sometimes I read when I should be writing other people's work because I just love it.
Yes.
But I do love to ride bikes.
Oh.
My husband and I are big bike riders, and we go on trips where we ride bikes. Like to Europe and stuff like that. Yeah. But when I'm normally riding my bike, it's very good to ride your bike for me, because sometimes I'm riding in my head and I have this little stand where I put my phone, and then I lean in close and I say, "Hey Siri, take a note." And if I'm working on a plot point, I make notes about it. Or if I'm, this wonderful, great paragraph comes into my head, I say it into the phone.
Yes.
So riding the bike is a great, amazing thing for me. It's something that I really love to do. And I love hiking. But now lately, you say you have some young kids. Lately, in the last 3 years, I have gotten 4 grandchildren.
Aww.
So that's my most favorite thing.
I bet.
Is to spend time with them. And unfortunately, the pandemic is getting right in the middle of that. But we spend as much time as we can on them, and we do a lot of babysitting on Zoom.
I'm sure your children appreciate that immensely.
Yeah, they get on Zoom and we listen to them, and I write while I'm talking to them, and they play while they're talking to us, and it's a perfect situation for both of us.
Awesome. Well, that's awesome. I think, I hate riding bikes. I crashed so many times when I was a kid, and now I just have this inherent fear of biking. But, I love to go on walks. And I think anything like that's just kind of breaks your routine and gets you outside. Or, I know a lot of people do the indoor biking now too. Anything that gets you that physical activity is so helpful, I think.
Yeah. Well, I was like you when I was a kid, though, because in Cuba, we lived in a neighborhood that lots of houses, lots of asphalt, lots of sidewalks, and I never really had a chance to learn how to ride a bike. I learned. Then at some point, like when I was 10 or 11, somebody had this great big bike, and I never had gotten a big bike, and I tried to ride it. And I ended up in the middle of the street with cars stopping all over the place because I fell off right in the middle of the street. But then my husband was a big bike rider, and I started learning to ride to really be a good biker when I was, again, like when I was riding back in my 50s, so that I could, he would go on bike rides and I would take the kids to church, so that was our trade-off on Sundays. And so I never was a bike rider until he retired, and I started riding with him, and then it became my love. I really, really enjoy it. And just like you, I love to walk, and I love to go, see pretty things and be outdoors, be out in nature.
Oh, it's the best. I love it so much. Well, I have just one final question for you. I would love to know right now, what is your favorite book? This is not your favorite book of all time, just something you've read recently that you really enjoyed.
Can I tell you a couple of new books?
Of course.
All right. So the brand new book that just came out about a week ago is called Alone. It's a middle grade by Megan Freeman.
The best book ever. I loved that book.
No kidding. Oh my gosh, Rose, it was so great.
So good.
She gets Maddie gets left behind during a disaster.
Yeah.
I mean, what more could you want for this big, strong girl to live for 4 years?
Ugh.
Gosh, I hope I didn't give that away. But she's the only one left in the town.
Yeah.
And A Place to Hang the Moon by Kate Albus is coming out soon. And I want to say it's February, but I'm not sure. But I read the arc, and it reminds me a little bit of the war that saved my life. But it's funnier, much, and the characters just run away with your heart. It's just a great book.
Oh.
So I'm reading that. I've just finished reading that. Amari and the Night Visitors is another great book. I think it's B.B. Alston.
Oh yeah, I've seen that one.
And it's a little bit like Harry Potter. But boy, that's one of those things that you just pick it up and you can't put it down.
I love those.
And of course, anything that Jason Reynolds reads, I read.
Well, wonderful. Thank you for sharing those. Like I said with favorite authors, it's always good to just share the books we're loving right now, right? We have so many we want to read, but it's always okay to add more to that list.
Yeah.
Well, wonderful.
Rose, thank you so very much for having me. This has been so much fun.
Of course, it's been such a pleasure.
We have so much in common, so I sure appreciate you. You've taken the time to spend with me in my little book.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the podcast. So fun that you got 2 new episodes in one day. Please make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an episode. And follow me on Instagram and Twitter @RoseQuinny, QUINNY. And see you next time.